Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about folding knives as fighting knives, folding fighters and whatnot. And they're very popular, primarily because you can throw it in a pocket or whatever. Now, most of the same attributes that you want in a fixed blade fighting knife, you're going to want in a folding knife. And that includes the handle material, handle texture, blade geometry, handle geometry, and so forth. However, there are some differences in the folding knife than a fixed blade, and we'll get into that a little bit. Now, one of the advantages of the folding knife, in fact, probably the only advantage, is that it can be folded to quite a small package, thrown in a pocket or whatever, and that when you unfold it, you do have some length to it. However, that does limit the size a bit. Anything over about a 4-inch blade actually becomes kind of unwieldy. So, for example, I have this Balisong. It's got an 8-inch blade, but because the handles have to cover the blade entirely, when it's unfolded, the knife becomes quite large, yet less than half of it is in blade length. And as you can see, this fixed blade is not much longer than just the handle or the folded version of this, and yet you're getting quite a bit of usable blade length there. Not much difference there. So this would actually maybe be preferable for carrying than this very large folder. Now the smaller folders, but again, you're limited in blade length. So, typical fighting knife would be, 6, 7 inches, 7.5 inches. This one's about 5.5 inches. Whereas your typical folder is only going to be 4, maybe 5 inches. Now the other issue is strength. So whereas this is a very inexpensive fixed blade, but it's a full tang. So this is all material here. Whereas here you have the little pins. And it can be a single pin on a standard folder, or in Balisong you got 2 pins. The pin becomes the weak point. Now you can make the pin larger, but then you're weakening the blade material. So you're always going to have a weak point here compared to a fixed blade. Even the most expensive folders are going to be weaker there than even a moderately priced fixed blade. Next problem is keeping the blade open. So for example, get a straight razor. There's no lock on that. You've always got to be careful the blade. In fact, you basically don't hang onto the handle at all. You hang onto the blade if you're going to fight with a straight razor. And they've been used successfully in fights on and off over the years. But it would not be a first choice by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, any folder would be a poor second or third choice behind a fixed blade or even any number of other tools. So you want some kind of a locking mechanism. Now the most basic locking mechanism is just a spring back, standard pocket knife, whatever, spring pressure. Open it up, spring pressure holds it open. However, any pressure on the back will fold it up, which means if your fingers are there, it's going to catch your fingers. So you have to either hold it with an open palm so that it can't get in there, and it's also going to limit your technique. In a stab, you're going to have to be extraordinarily careful about the angle, and this is besides just putting lateral stresses on it. So, slashing might be more preferable, but you always have to be aware that that blade may close. So we go to like a lock back, and this is a standard rocker lock back, and that locking mechanism snaps into a notch in the back of the blade. But even these, you put sufficient pressure on the blade, they will close up. Now this one uses a slightly different mechanism. This rocker works in this direction, and there's a pin that engages a hole in the side of the blade. But again, you've got just a very small locking mechanism, a very small pin and hole holding it. Now this is a little better. This is a frame lock, and you can see the locking mechanism is part of the frame right there. Locks open, this snaps in right behind the blades, so you have a considerable amount of contact. Sufficient lateral force may allow it to slip past the lock, but this is a pretty solid system. And that does allow the blade to lock, but again, it's not going to be as strong as a fixed blade. Here's a liner lock, works in the similar fashion. It's just the spring and the lock is inside the handle here. And now the handle, if you've got an open space here on Balisongs, you've got 2 open spaces. So that is an area that does not have any material to hang on to, so it does limit your grip just a little bit. Now comes the other issue. If you're going to stab with one of these, you can induce lateral stresses, you can cause it to close, cause it to snap off, whatever, because you do have the weak point there. So you might be better off with more slashing techniques and so on. So you might be better off with a blade that's designed more for slashing. In addition, this has space for your thumb right here that allows you to take the stress off of the locking mechanism, transfer it to the blade, so you're working with just the blade. And as a matter of fact, one of the things you can do with the spring type non-locking blades is quite literally just hang on to the blade and let the handle work, get back in your hand, but there's no chance of it closing on you at that point because you're hanging on to the actual blade itself. And obviously that's awkward and less preferable than having a good handle to hang on to. Here's another one. It's got, again, a space for the thumb back here so you can take the stresses if you're slashing with it, cutting with it. The stress is taken off of the lock mechanism, off of the pivot, and directly into your thumb, directly against the blade. Balisongs are nice. They've got that 3-point, so they can't really close. Now you can still snap off the pins, but the blade is not going to close on your fingers. I mean, you're going to snap it off before it's going to do that. However, again, because of the way it has to be designed, the handle geometry lacks a bit. As you can see, this one gives you a lot more places to hang on to, much more comfortable, and you're able to apply forces a lot more. This one's very straight, and again, it's got the 2 empty spaces here. It can make it a little tough to hang on to. That's where the texturing and the material of the handle becomes much more important on the Balisong style knives. But as you can see, there are some serious disadvantages compared to a fixed blade or even any number of other weapons. Make a folding fighting knife would be a distant third choice in a fight. I'd be much more likely to go with, again, either a fixed blade of some sort or a different weapon entirely. But your basic principles of, again, handle geometry, handle material, blade design all apply. It's just a matter of your preferences. Again, where a fixed blade, something suitable for stabbing, might be fine. You're not necessarily going to want to stab with a folder, and especially since you're going to be somewhat limited in the depth of the stab because of the length of the blade. So again, perhaps something that's better designed for slashing would be first choice in a folding knife.